Wow, thank you. Thank you. There's no podium, and my notes are over there, so I'll be walking over there a little bit. Is that all right? Okay. I just want to say thank you for having me here. It's great to be at Portland Community College. Give yourselves a round of applause. I did write down some things. It's important to me to thank people. Ms. Shelley, Ms. Root, can we give them a round of applause, please? The Southeast Multicultural Center, the Women's Resource Center, Associated Students of Portland Community College, the Office of Equity and Inclusion. Are you just brand? No. The Southeast Diversity Council. All right. PCC Links Programs? Okay. Dan, thank you. I'm humbled by your words and the introduction, and just thank you all for being here. Students, community, faculty, staff. Where are the students at out there? Hold your hand up. Make some noise if you're a student. All right. All right. There is so much on my mind. Oh, the sign language community as well. Thank you for being here. Thank you. There's so much on my mind, and I'd like to start the way I usually start, which is, can we all agree that we're all part of this human family, this human race called, that we're all sisters and brothers. We're all in this together. Can we agree to that? Yes. Because as I was preparing to come here, I turned on the TV, and I was watching the news. And there was Melissa McCarthy as Sean Spicer. No. Anyone see Saturday Night Live on Saturday? Wasn't that incredible? Melissa is a rock star. I've always loved her, but she just took it to a whole nother level. It's one of the best sketches I've ever seen in the history of Saturday Night Live. But there was Sean Spicer, the real-life White House spokesperson, giving, some updates. The harsh reality is, let me say this. I don't care if you're a liberal or conservative, a Democrat, Republican, Independent, however you identify yourselves politically, it's political spectrum. I've been meeting with a lot of folks that are as diverse as the folks in this room the last couple of weeks in New York. I'm from New York City, but I grew up in Jersey, so I definitely got to shout out Jersey and New York. And it's clear to me that we've got some serious times ahead of us. And it's clear that every single nominee of Mr. Trump is going to get through. It's just going to happen. In fact, Wolf Blitzer asked an expert, is this going to happen? He said, absolutely. And if anyone has studied politics the way I've studied politics, I was a political science major at Rutgers University way back in the day, during the Reagan-Bush years. This always happens. It always happens. It always happens. And so for me, when I think about what do we do now, where we are in America in the age of Trump, one thing I want us to not forget is that everyone in this room, just look around people in this room, every single person in this room has been through some sort of adversity in their lives. Am I right, y'all? Yes. Or you have family members who've been through some sort of adversity, It may be because of race. It may be because of gender or gender identity or class or your religion or the fact that you may be agnostic or atheistic or your ability or disability. Y'all with me out there? Yes. We've all had some sort of trials and tribulations. And so, I keep that in perspective when I think about people saying how scared they are, how shocked they are, even a couple months after the election, and not knowing what's going to happen. I say to y'all, don't forget that we've been through a lot of stuff. And if we just look at our own family histories, or the histories of our communities in places like Portland, Oregon, or New York City, where I live now, understand that anything is possible. But what it's going to take, more than ever, is that word love. Can y'all say love? And people coming together as communities. Are y'all with me out there? Yes. This is very serious. How y'all doing? Peace, y'all. Peace. So I just wanted to start there because it's so clear that we've got folks that are tripping. For folks who are coming in, and there's seats up front too, right there. It's like 6 of them, and it's 6 of y'all. That's perfect. Right on. Hey, so we have a football player, a band member? Okay, all right. And basketball? Did someone say basketball? Okay. So we're talking about where we are in the country right now. And there's hate out there, there's division, there's violence. I'm watching this press conference, Mr. Sean Spencer, and he kept talking about all the stuff that we're trying to keep out of the country. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And I'm saying to myself, as a New Yorker who knows two people who died on 9/11, and many of us were affected by 9/11 all over the country, obviously. I'm saying to myself, because I'm also a student of facts. Remember that thing, facts? Not alternative facts, but just basic facts. Proper research. Anyone who's over 30, y'all are with me. When we were growing up, there was something called microfiche. There was something called the library that's right across the way on this campus. There's something called encyclopedias and books, little things like that. Remember those things? It's amazing, right? If we use them. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, you're going to ban people who are Muslim from these countries, but the people who created the 9/11 havoc were from these countries. That's right. And so I'm saying, okay, that's one. And number two, I'm a Christian now. I live in a city, New York City, that has a huge Muslim population, huge Jewish population, folks who are Hindu, Rastafarian, Yoruba, all kinds of faiths, people who are agnostic, atheistic. We're a community, we're a nation of many faiths or beliefs. And I'm saying to myself, we're acting like Muslim sisters and brothers just popped up here because it's also Black History Month, right? Which was created by Carter G. Woodson in 1926 as Negro History Week. He was a great scholar of Black American and American history, Carter G. Woodson. He didn't get his high school diploma until he was in his 20s, y'all. Community colleges, this is why y'all are so valuable. Because you give people an opportunity, no matter how young or how old, to get an education. Are y'all with me out there? Yes. And Carter G. Woodson would study, because he lived in West Virginia, to a kerosene lamp. And then he went on to get a PhD. And he realized, wait a minute, a lot of folks, myself included, don't know basic American history, and we don't know Black American history, or Latino American history, or Native American history, or Jewish American history, or Irish American history. Y'all follow me for a second? Filipino history, women's history, queer history, should I go on, disabled history. We don't know a lot about all the people who make this place called America. So he created Negro History Week in 1926 because two people who were important to American and Black American history were born in the month of February. Not because it was the shortest month. They were born in February. One of the people born in February was just cited by Mr. Trump last week because he's still alive. He's like over 200 years old now. He's like biblical years, right? His name is Frederick Douglass. He was, like Barack Obama, a biracial man, half Black, half white, but he was born into slavery. And during his years in slavery, read the narrative of Frederick Douglass, one of the best autobiographies ever written. During his time in slavery, he learned how to read and write. Education, college students, he became empowered by what he was learning. And he realized, I deserve to be free, not a slave. Are y'all with me out there? Yes. He escaped from slavery. In fact, in New York City, where I live, right, not far from where 9/11 happened, tragically, there's actually a marker where Frederick Douglass came into New York City at one point. One of my friends who I went to college with, look it up, named Ted Ham, just published a book, The Brooklyn Speeches of Frederick Douglass. I had no idea he gave speeches in Brooklyn, New York. You know? He was born in February. Well, who else was born in February? There was a man named Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of this country, who grappled. Oh my gosh. Thank you. And it says Portland Community College. Can I just respectfully ask anyone who's videotaping with their phones not to, that we have this is for your school, what's being done back there, and can we all just share that copy that'll be on your YouTube page, please? Okay. Thank you.
You could just push it wherever you want it.
Okay, are we good? Yeah. So Abraham Lincoln was born in February. Some of us, when we were growing up, anyone over 30, remember when we would celebrate Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday? Yes. And then someone decided, let's just call it President's Day, you know, in February. But that's where it came from. You know, both Washington and Lincoln were born in February. And so here we are, Lincoln, Emancipation Proclamation, freed the slaves. Back then, Republicans were very different. Lincoln was a Republican than what they are now. Back then, most black folks were Republicans because of Abraham Lincoln. It wasn't until 1932 when a man named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a disabled brother, ran for president of the United States in the middle of the Great Depression that people started to switch or move over to what became the modern Democratic Party. Are y'all with me out there? Yeah. History, as Malcolm X has said, Malcolm X, read the autobiography of Malcolm X. You want to learn about America from a perspective of folks that are different than you, the America we should all know about? Read the autobiography of Malcolm X. But this is why Carter G. Woodson picked February. It was called Negro History Week, and because of the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, we switched from Negro to black because it's important to define yourself for yourself. Never let people tell you who you are. You tell them who you are. And it was expanded to a full month, Black History Month. And it's not just for black people. Black history is American history. Spirituals, blues, jazz, rock and roll, soul, hip hop, hip hop, hip hop. Son, I'm a hip hop head for life. You can't talk about American music without talking about the amazing contributions of black people. You can't talk about driving in a car and stopping at a traffic light without acknowledging a black man named Garrett Morgan, who was from Ohio, who patented what we now call the modern traffic light. Red is for stop, yellow is for wait, green is for go. Look him up. He also invented the gas mask, a black man. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, look it up. It's out there. And so that's the challenge for us. I can't speak for anyone else, but I've been blessed to visit all 50 states in this country. I didn't get on a plane until I was 24 years old. I didn't know that you can go anywhere. I knew about Greyhound buses and Amtrak, And what I'm saying to you all, when you start to travel, when you start to study, when you start to read in a different kind of way, your mind expands. Your mind expands. And you start to ask yourself a question, because I don't think we can talk about racism or sexism or classism or homophobia or transphobia or religious hatred or reckless disregard and disrespect for disabled sisters and brothers if we don't ask a fundamental question. Who am I? Who am I? And where did I get this identity from? Well, for me, my family's from the South, South Carolina. We're from the area of the South called the Low Country, There's a movie that came out 25 years ago called Daughters of the Dust. Look the movie up by a great filmmaker, a black woman named Julie Dash. And it's about this black community in the South that spoke this kind of patois, just like we hear in the Philippines, just like we hear in the in the Caribbean, a certain kind of dialect where their traditional tongue was actually doing war with the language that was put on them. Y'all know what I'm talking about. My family comes from there. My mother was born in the 1940s, in the middle of World War II, 1943, right? And she grew up in a world, and I was just with her the other day. She's now 73 years old. There was for colors only signs and for whites only signs. We are not going to deal with the issue of race and racism in this country if we as American people are not willing to have honest conversations once and for all about race and racism in this country. Are y'all with me out there? You know what I mean? And when we talk about the history from our perspectives, anyone out there Italian or Irish, got Italian or Irish brother out there, anybody? Look at all those hands. Think about how people who were considered ethnic whites were treated. Irish people, Italian people. Go look at a movie by a great filmmaker named Martin Scorsese, Gangs of New York, how the native whites were fighting and disrespecting the ethnic whites, the foreign whites. Let's get them out of here. Let's exclude them. Let's ban them. Let's send them back to where they came from. Let's put them in concentration camps, internment camps. Let's enslave them, make them indentured servants. Are y'all following me for a second? If I'm Chinese American, let me get them out of Oregon. Oregon. Did I just say Oregon? That's the New York in me. Sorry, East Coast.
You only get one.
I only get one. I am going to give the rest of my speech to the sign language sister then. I'm not going to say anything else. But my point is, this is not new. But if we don't know the history, we repeat it over and over again. So my mother grew up in the South, and when she was 8 years old, and her sisters, there was 4 girls and 1 boy, and a father and mother in a 2-room shack. I want y'all to imagine this for a second. They were dirt poor. My grandfather could read on a 2nd or 3rd grade level. So if you are a student here at Portland Community College, or you haven't already have a degree or 2 or 3, you have a better education than people in a lot of our families. Do not take that for granted. And so when I see people come to community colleges or Harvard University, because Portland Community College and Harvard are equal in my eyes, do not take for granted the opportunity that you got, because you're not just going to school for yourself, you're going to school for all the people. My grandfather, second, third grade level, my grandmother could not read or write. My mama has a grade school education. Why does she have a grade school education? Because of the racism, the sexism, and the classism of being a poor black woman in America. She was perceived to be and seen only as the help, even as a little girl. Go pick that cotton, which is what she did. Go work in the homes of well-to-do, wealthy white sisters and brothers, which she did. You know? And if we have eyes of privilege, let's call it eyes of privilege. Can we do that, brother man? Eyes of privilege. You know, we don't see the humanity in people. And so we start to refer to people as ghetto and hood and trailer trash and poor white trash and aliens and illegal aliens, and not as human beings. Are y'all with me out there? You know what I mean? We conveniently put labels on people. If we see the world with eyes of privilege, we don't respect the assistants or secretaries on this campus. We don't speak to the security workers on this campus. We don't respect the folks who clean up the campus. Are y'all with me out there? You know what I mean? And his humanity is the equal of my humanity. I'm not better than him. You know? We are fellow human beings. Am I right? But people didn't see my mama like that, or her sisters, and so they were forced when they were young women, because they were like, there's no way we're going to stay in this environment where, because of the racism and the sexism and the classism all colliding, you want to talk about intersectionality, which is all over college campuses, then y'all need to study the history of women of color in this country. You know what I mean? Asian women, Latino women, black women, Native American women, Middle Eastern women. You know what I mean? Working class white sisters as well. You know? They moved up north looking for a better life. They were so poor down south, my mother told me many times, because black folks tell the same stories over and over again, just like every other group. You're like, you heard this story before, but we're going to say it again. Come on. It's Thanksgiving. Let's talk some stories. And they were so poor, the only meal they had, they would pour some syrup in a bowl and they would pass it around. Father, mother, 4 girls, a boy. Think about that for a second. 2-room shack. There was something called an outhouse. They didn't have electricity or a bathroom inside their home. Y'all with me out there? Mm-hmm. You know, when I hear people say, well, I want to go overseas and, you know, see how people are suffering, I'm like, man, you could see how people are struggling right here in America, right here in the state of Oregon. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean that we shouldn't support people everywhere. My heart is wherever people are suffering. They were so poor, the girls would take turns going to school because there was one dress that they shared. And then this is where the sexism kicks in. Fellas, men there, I said it was one boy. None of the girls got to finish grade school or high school. The boy got a high school diploma because he was favored because he was a boy. Sexism, patriarchy, misogyny. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Somehow his life is more important than the girl's life, this boy. My mother moves up north. She gets up there. She's so disconnected from the world outside of black and white, colored and white. The first week she got to the north, the New York area, she thought there was an outer space invasion. Why did she think that? Because it was February 1964, and people kept saying, the Beatles are coming, the Beatles are coming, the Beatles are coming. And my mother was like, what the heck are the Beatles? Well, now we know, right? They were from outer space. They were from England. Our cousins from England. I love the UK, seriously. They're so poor, still, they're now the help, because what skill sets did they have? They had to work in the homes of wealthy people. You want to talk about the intersectionality, one of the stories my mother told me that I share in my memoir that's back there is how my mother was working in the home of a wealthy white family. The father, the male figure, was there with my mother. One day he just sits down with a robe on, and he opens his legs, and there's his private parts. And so when we're repulsed by Mr. Trump saying grab them by we need to understand people have been saying that and doing that forever. Because just like this country was founded on racism, the founding fathers were rich, privileged, white male landowners. They weren't talking about black people. They weren't talking about Native Americans. They weren't talking about women of any background. Y'all with me out there? You know what I mean? They weren't talking about working class white people either. Look up Shays' Rebellion. Those were working class white brothers and sisters saying, wait a minute, what about us? What about us? Well, the country was also founded on sexism. All men are created equal, but what about the women? I mean, let's think about the fact that it's been still less than 100 years since women of any background have had the right to vote in this country. You want to know why all those women showed up in Washington and all over the country and all over the world? Because sisters, women are like, enough. Enough is enough. That was incredible. It was incredible. My mother and my two aunts who moved up north shared a bed up north until they were able to get rooms, not apartments, rooms. Then eventually my mother and my Aunt Kathy shared an apartment together. That's how I grew up. One pair of shoes, one pair of sneakers. At some point in the middle of all this, my mother met my father, back to sexism. My mother fell in love with my father. My father fell in lust with my mother. And I was created. And my father didn't even have the decency to show up at the hospital when I was born. My mother literally had to call a cab to take herself to the hospital. And so men, you know, and I love, let me make it very clear, I love being what we call identify as a man. I'm a man, I'm a dude, a boy, I am. But there's something wrong with our definitions of manhood if the only thing we can view folks who identify as women as are caretakers and sexual objects and nothing else. So now my mother's in the north. It's almost like she took the poverty from the south and brought it up to the north, and she's forced to raise me on welfare, food stamps, government cheese, and the kind of poverty I wouldn't wish on anybody. Does that story sound familiar to anybody out there? You know, single mothers, man, let's give them a round of applause. Seriously. And imagine this. It wasn't until I got to college on a financial aid package when I was 18 years old, Rutgers University, as I said, in New Jersey. I never had my own bedroom. I never had my own bed. My bed was, the first 8, 9 years of my life, my mother and I shared a bed in the bedroom. My Aunt Kathy and her son Anthony, who was the same age as me, because his father did the same thing that my father did, thank you and goodbye, you know, they shared a bed. Then when we were about 8 or 9 years old, both our mothers got folding beds. And our folding beds were literally next to their beds. I mean, think about this for a second. And then at some point, my mother and Aunt Kathy finally were able to afford separate one-bedroom apartments. And now my folding bed was in the living room, just like my cousin Anthony's was in the living room. And then at some point in our teenage years, we were finally able to afford things we take for granted. Maybe a sofa bed. This is where I come from. Yeah, I've published 12 books. Yeah, I've seen the country. Yeah, I've been to 5 of the 7 continents. Yeah, I do stuff in the media all the time. Yeah, my next book is about the life of Tupac Shakur. Yeah, but so what if you forget where you come from? So what if you start to see the world with eyes of privilege and you ignore the humanity of people out there? Are y'all with me out there? 3 things saved my life, and this is for the students, and this is really for everybody. One, it's called faith. Can y'all say faith? Faith. That doesn't necessarily mean some dialectical conversation about God and organized religion. I believe in spirituality. Even though I'm a Christian, I believe in spirituality, not organized religion, because I feel like organized religion has been used to harm a lot of people. And I belong to 2 churches. And I've also, for the record, been a Muslim in my lifetime as well, which is why I'm very sensitive to people disrespecting folks who are Muslim. And I live in a city that has the biggest Jewish population outside of the state of Israel, New York City, so I'm very sensitive to anti-Semitism. Y'all with me out there? But faith means, what did Dr. King say? Even if you can't see the stairs, you go forward anyway. You got to believe in yourself. When the New England Patriots, who I cannot stand, because I'm from New York. New York sports fans don't rock with Boston sports fans. It's a historical thing. But when it was 28-3, anyone watch the Super Bowl? I'm sitting there talking mad trash, like, man, Tom Brady gonna get that 5th ring. Bill Belichick, he looks really mad now. But those 53 players and that coaching staff had faith. And they won that game. And I can't front. I'm like, this is amazing if you believe in yourself. You can overcome anything. Well, look where I come from. My mother had faith that anything was possible. How far did I say my mother went in school? Grade school. But from the time I was 3 or 4 years old, as she was raising me, This woman who does not read any books other than bits and pieces of the Bible, who only reads the local newspapers, said to me over and over again, you're going to college, you're going to college, you're going to college, you're going to college. Because she understood I got to go further, as she always said to me, than she ever went in school. Which led to the second thing that saved my life. Education, students, reading, writing, arithmetic, the basics. Do not take it for granted, the ability to learn. As much as I love this little thing called an iPhone, you can't allow this to be the way you learn. There's something remarkable. I can't speak for y'all, but when I come to Portland, which is often, and I drive past or walk past Powell's bookstore, I get excited, not because it's my last name. Well, it is, but I was like, yeah, that's my store. No. But I support independent bookstores, and the store is massive, and there's books of all kinds, and it takes me back to when I was 8 years old. My mama with a grade school education. What saved my life? Faith, number one. Education, number two. Let me take this boy to the library. She let me roam all over the library. You know what I mean? And what I always said to students out there, be honest with me, raise your hand if you don't like to read books. No shame in that. How many of y'all don't like to read? No shame. There's no, can we say no judgment, y'all? And safe space? Even though it's going to be on YouTube, safe space? Know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? But what I'm getting at, I go to a lot of places, like I'll be with the Portland School District on Friday. I was here in November with the Portland School District. I would say half the students raise their hands at an assembly. You know, Portland high school students. Hey, how y'all doing? That's cool. We got an ad lib, right? Half the students said they didn't like to read. You know what they said? Because it's boring. What did I read when I was a child? It's comic books. More importantly for me, sports. Notice I referenced the Super Bowl. Read read things you're interested in first, develop your love of reading, and then expand beyond that. Does that make sense? Yes. You know what I mean? You're not gonna get a young person to read Shakespeare if they think, wait a minute, this is old English. You know what I mean? What is this? This is not the way I speak, and who's this dude Shakespeare anyway? But by the time I got to Shakespeare, I had read Hemingway and Powell and Emily Dickinson and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I was like, okay, I can make my way to it. But I also found books that I could relate to, like The Outsiders. Remember that book? S.E. Hinton, about young people. This is me in the book. I feel this. Does that make sense, y'all? Yeah. Education saved my life. Then the third thing that saved my life, simple. My mother had a plan. Go to college. You have to have a work ethic. Students, you cannot do anything in life if you don't have a plan for your life. It's really basic. What's your plan? And if your plan changes, you know, I guarantee if you go back to the Super Bowl as a metaphor, the football game is a metaphor. Bill Belichick, Brady, the whole team, the Patriots had a plan. Hey, it's 28-3. We got to figure another plan out right now. But if you're prepared and you have faith, you can even adjust on the fly your plan. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But I want to go a little bit deeper for a second. What is education? It's not just reading, writing, arithmetic, the basics. We should know those things. We should master those things. You know, when I graduated from high school, I won a math award. I won an English award. I love trig. I love calculus. I love everything. Plus my mother was not tolerating bad grades. She's like, no. I mean, she was my one-person support system, my mother. But what I learned when I got to college on a financial aid package, because we had no money for college, when I was in high school, I literally had to fill out applications. My mother didn't know what the applications meant. I would just bring it to her and say, Mom, can you just sign on the X for Penn State, Rutgers, Syracuse, Pace University, and here's the financial aid papers. Can you just sign right here? That's how I got to college. But where did that determination came from? I got it from my mama. Y'all feel me? Yes. You hear all those stories growing up about what she survived. You have no excuse, y'all. And so are we going to trip in the era of Trump if we hear these stories about what our mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers and uncles, if they can come through what they came through, why are we tripping? Does that make sense? Yep. But education I learned in college, I was like, man, I don't know anything about black history. I get to college in the 1980s. There's this thing called the anti-apartheid movement. Anyone remember that? They kept talking about someone named Nelson Mandela that was in South Africa. I was like, son, the New York comes out of me. Son, where's South Africa at? I know about the South Bronx, which created hip-hop. I know about South Carolina, where my people are from. South Africa sounds like mad far. And who's this Nelson Mandela dude? And what is apartheid? And then they explained it to me. They said, well, in South Africa, they actually studied some of the stuff that was going on in America, how Native Americans were treated in America, reservations, and moving people off their land. Y'all feel me? And also segregation and how people had to walk around with ID or what they call passcodes. Y'all feel me? And I said, oh, that's what's going on in South Africa. So that affected me. And then I read the autobiography of Malcolm X because someone told me to read it. And I'm going to say this to y'all, no matter what you are, Irish, Italian, German, Polish, Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, you know, whatever your background is, how can you call yourself a human being, an American, if you can't even talk about your family history beyond one generation? How'd you get here? Or if you've been here all along, as our indigenous brothers and sisters have been, who are you? What are the languages? What's your culture? You know? Does that make sense, y'all? And I realized I knew nothing about myself. You know, Malcolm X, never heard of him. Black history, when I was growing up, K through 12, the best schools in Jersey City, New Jersey, where I'm from, might have totaled in those 13 years 2 or 3 pages. That's it. The same stuff about Rosa Parks, Dr. King always having a dream. And I love Dr. King, but that speech, I Have a Dream speech, August 28, 1963, which was also the 20th birthday of my mother, he lived 5 more years. What did he do after that? Where was his Vietnam War speech at in my education? You know? Where was his poor people's campaign in my education? He didn't say poor blacks or poor whites. He said poor people. Let's bring people together of different backgrounds. What Dr. King was talking about in 67, 68, think about it. In the last presidential election, a lot of working class white brothers and sisters supported Donald Trump because he spoke to them in a certain language that they were like, yeah. And then you got poor people over here of color saying, no, we can't get with that. And the poor people that Dr. King wanted to bring together are fighting each other. Working class Americans fighting each other. And meanwhile, a small percentage owns and controls everything. Y'all feel me? But if we don't read, we don't study, we don't travel, we don't know this stuff. And we get caught up in all the isms and divisions. I don't like this one because of their race, this one because of their gender identity, this one because of their religion, this one because of their class background, this one because of their ability, this one because of their disability. Fighting each other. Does that make sense, y'all? So I realized education means I got to know who I am. I discovered the E185 section of the library. The black students here, and everybody should write that down, the E185 section of the library. That's where all the black books are, y'all. Remember the Dewey Decimal System? It's wonderful. E185, that's where all the black books are. Why was that important? Because I needed to know who I was. My history did not start with slavery. Africa, go on Huffington Post and other websites. Africa, one of the cradles of civilization. You know, like China, one of the cradles of civilization. Like Mexico, one of the cradles of civilization. You know what I mean? I love reading about the Greeks and Romans, but let's not act like they were the only ones out here doing stuff. You feel me? I mean, I will quote Greek and Roman philosophy all day. But I also want to know about Timbuktu in Africa. You know what I mean? I want to know what was going on in Ethiopia. You know what I mean? That's equally important. And when you learn about yourself, you move from self-hatred as a black person, since this is Black History Month, you know what I mean? I'm not ugly because of my skin color or my nose or my lips or my hips or anything about me or my hair. Your hair texture is not better than my hair texture. Your eyes are not better than my eyes because mine are shaped a certain way and yours are shaped another way. You know, your standard of beauty is not superior to my standard of beauty. Does that make sense, y'all? You know what I mean? We're all equals here. Everyone's beautiful. Everyone's handsome. But when you lift one up as superior and everyone else as inferior or a minority, which is a word we should get rid of forever, forever, ever, you know what I mean? You destroy the psyche of people. And so when I hear people say to me, Kevin Powell, why do people say the N-word all the time? I said, because they've been miseducated to believe that that's all they are and never to even question where the word came from. You know, Kev, you know, I hear you talking about sexism, but why do these women do the things they do in videos and stuff like that? Because women, I mean, think about the education. Just like I didn't learn black history, growing up, women's history, K through 12, 13 years of school. Betsy Ross stole the flag. Florence Nightingale. Remember Helen Keller? Didn't really learn anything about her. She was disabled. That's what we learned. You know what I mean? I had no idea how amazing Helen Keller was until I was like, wow, she was a leader. She was progressive. Rosa Parks, so she serves double duty. Here she is for Black history, and here she is for women's history. And in the last 10 years, we could say, well, Hillary Clinton and Michelle Obama, we can throw them in there. But most of us can't even name 10, 15, 20 women in American history. Why would you like yourself? Why would you not refer to yourself in a derogatory way? Does that make sense? And then if we are men perpetuating patriarchy, why would we not participate in sex trafficking of young girls every Super Bowl weekend? Why would we not be the ones who, 90% of the cases of domestic violence in this country are us doing it to women and girls? The molestation, the incest, all of it. Y'all with me out there? You know, gross miseducation. And so I realized for myself as a black person, hey, there's this system called racism. It's a system. These are systems. System means, hey, the school system is not inclusive of all people. The mass media culture system is not inclusive of all people. You know what I mean? And therefore, I'm going to get a very biased perspective, a limited perspective on who I am. And my education, my rereading of stuff made me say, you know what, this is not acceptable anymore. This is not acceptable. You know, if y'all get a chance, check out a piece I wrote about Cam Newton, the football player, since we're talking about the Super Bowl, who was in the Super Bowl last year. It's on Huffington Post. It's called Cam Newton and the Killing of a Mockingbird. And the reason why I wrote the piece is because I've watched how people have attacked Cam Newton over the last year or so. And yeah, there's some criticism that she levied against him, but I'm looking at the same time, it's like, wait a minute. This young man doesn't get in trouble. He's a father of 2 kids now. He has a foundation, does much stuff in the community. But you know, a Tom Brady, a Peyton Manning, and a Peyton Manning who has sexual charges going all the way back to college in the late 1990s that are still flying around him, no one says anything. That's called racism, y'all. You know what I mean? Look it up. Look it up. It's out there. And then on top of that, since we're talking about black history and racism, I said, wait a minute. They're making a big deal about this black quarterback. Well, Fritz Pollard was the first black quarterback in the 1920s. In this country. And not only was he a dope quarterback, but he was a running back, and he was a head coach for what became known as the National Football League. But by the early 1930s, this same National Football League that over 100 million people watching the Super Bowl on Sunday don't realize in the 1930s, they actually banned black players from the National Football League. Look it up. It's all in my article. Because I don't just write stuff. I research everything. You know what I mean? Because so even sports is a metaphor for our country. You know what I mean? So here we are, education. We've got to ask ourselves a question. What do I know about myself? And what do I know about people who might be different than me? And do I have the courage to cross cultural boundaries and say, hey, Jewish sister or brother, hey, Muslim sister or brother, hey, Christian sister or brother, hey, Sikh sister or brother, you know, can you tell me something about who you are? I want to learn. Does that make sense, y'all? Yeah. Yep. You know? And it means that we got to have some love in our lives. You know what I mean? We've got to move towards love. Like, I don't know y'all, but I love y'all. Even if we don't like you, we're not going to like everybody. Can we agree to that? Yeah. Like, son, I don't really like that dude. You know what I mean? No. But love means that you lift people up as you're lifting yourself up. Love means that you're going to be the opposite of Mr. Spicer at that White House press conference earlier where you're just destroying people. Even how he calls the reporters' names. They said that the media, the American media is now an oppositional party. Have y'all heard that? I'm like, that's insanity. You know what I mean? Because we're now moving towards fascism, which is the opposite of love. Democracy, or true democracy, which what we're struggling for from the very beginning, what we did to Native Americans, what we did to black people as we enslaved them, what we did to Irish people and Jewish people and Japanese people and Chinese people, that was the opposite of love. What we've done to women. I mean, I don't know about, I can't even imagine what it's like to be a woman knowing that there's someone in the White House who's a sexual predator. Let's call it what it is. But you have people who are around him, men and women, who are endorsing and rubber stamping, co-signing on that. Because they think about how they feel about themselves. And because love, Dr. King said it, there's nothing wrong with power. But there's something wrong with power if it's not rooted in love. I'm going to leave y'all with this. Where are my Irish sisters and brothers out there? Word. A lot of y'all. Much love to y'all. One of my heroes was a Roman Catholic, Irish-American brother named Bobby Kennedy. Love Bobby Kennedy. And just think about it. Follow me for a second, because this is a part of American history. And this ties into our intersectionality that we're talking about here. Who was his brother, y'all? Who was president? John, JFK. Camelot, right? That's what they called the White House. Bobby Kennedy was what? What was he when his brother became president? What was his position? Attorney General. People accused John Kennedy of nepotism. That's probably true. He hooked his brother up. Bobby probably was not qualified to be Attorney General, and he was mad young. He was in his early 30s. He was young. But the Kennedys look out for each other. Now, I know some folks who are Kennedys, and they're American royalty. If no one else is, they are in so many different ways. What was going on when Bobby Kennedy became Attorney General in this country in 1961? The Civil Rights Movement. You had black folks and white folks, young people, students, young people, freedom rides, sit-ins, protesting, being attacked, but trying to change the country. You know? Last night when I got into my hotel here in Portland, I turned on, what is your public station called? Oregon Public Broadcasting? OPB, yes. And they were talking about the history of racism in Portland. I was like, thank y'all, appreciate it. And it was just like they were talking about any other state in this country, the vicious racism, but only because people challenged it. Well, Bobby was reluctant, even as Attorney General, to support these people, even as folks were dying, black folks and white folks, right? Then something happened in November of 1963. His brother, John, gets killed on TV. That was that generation's 9/11. The President of the United States just got his head blown off. People were shocked. Bobby Kennedy, who was John's closest confidant and his blood brother, is deeply traumatized, just the way many of us are traumatized right now by the circumstances of this country. He goes into mourning. When he comes back a year or so later, he's a different person. In the last 4 years of his life, this young Roman Catholic, Irish-American, white brother of privilege, the Kennedys are super wealthy, began to use his platform and his voice to speak out and speak for people who were less fortunate. Not less equal, just didn't have the privileges that he had. Look up his speech when he went to South Africa in 1966. He went into the teeth of apartheid and talked about and used the term white supremacy. Look up, right on YouTube, the speech he gave the night that Dr. King was killed, April 4th, 1968, in Indianapolis. Bobby Kennedy is one of only a few white people there. It's a rally filled with black folks because by this point, Bobby's running for president, and he had to, as a white brother, say to these black people that a white man had just killed Dr. King. But the way he gave that speech, some of y'all know what I'm talking about, right? And his compassion, his empathy. Indianapolis was one of the only cities that did not explode in rebellion the day that Dr. King was killed. He was killed 2 months later, but his spirit lives. And I'll tell you why I say that. I'm going to Oakland Friday night, and a couple years ago, Oakland Museum had an exhibit called 1968. And there were white, black, Latino, Asian, Native American, people of all backgrounds, all identities at this exhibit. And there was one part of the exhibit that we went to. It was a scene of Bobby Kennedy's casket on a train driving down the East Coast, and you saw people of all races and backgrounds saluting that casket. And I said, I get emotional thinking about it. But this is where we are, brothers and sisters and brothers, fellow human beings. We got we're in hard times. But I refuse to believe that we can't turn this around. If you look at the women's marches a few weeks ago, that shows the power of people. If you look at all the folks who came out to fight the ban that came out last weekend, that shows the power of people. Are y'all with me out there? But we got to have courageous conversations around race and gender identity and class and ability and disability, religion or no religion. We got to be willing to talk with and, more importantly, listen to each other. Thank you.